Hi there, it's Nicole from Mama Elephant, and today I have a card showcasing the new Words Defined stamp set, and I've paired it with the Page Huggers stamps and coordinating dies. The Words Defined stamp set is simply awesome because it's these great big bold greetings with the definition underneath, and I think there's just so many great fun ways to use these. I am using the stripe cover die to create the background of my whole little scene here. This was really probably the focal point. I knew I wanted to use the Page Huggers, one of the critters, I used the bunny, to hold onto the definition strip, but I wanted to create something fun. And as I was going through my Mama Elephant collection, I found this stripe cover die, and it dawned on me that I could maybe tuck some things into each of those little rectangular cutout sections like a pocket. So what I ended up doing was taking some scraps of watercolor cardstock, using the Grassy Trio border dies, and I'm going to die cut a bunch of these from the watercolor cardstock. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to, exactly be even. I'm actually going to be trimming them up to fit inside each of those little sections. And then I'm going to be coloring everything with distress inks before I add my stamped greeting and my bunny and the carrots, all of that. So it's just a really fun way to use that stripe cover die. All of these watercolor scraps are just scraps I had left over from full sheets from other projects. I did use my grid paper here to kind of gauge how long my grassy border needed to be, and I'm going to trim that down with a paper trimmer. And then you can see that's going to fit right inside there just like a little pocket. So most of these little openings are going to have little tufts of grass sticking out of them. I'm going to do 5 of these, and I'm going to leave, I believe, one of them empty simply because the greeting strip is going to be covering that up. Now, originally I thought that I would probably only need 4 of these little things of grass. I like to lay out my dies, my stamps. You can see I moved my stamps back in there to kind of gauge and look at it and see what I exactly needed before I commit to anything. That way it gives me a good idea of what I'm going to need so that I don't A, waste a bunch of time, and B, make sure everything is going to fit kind of the way I think it's going to in my mind. I'm going to trim down a strip of white cardstock now to stamp my greeting on. And I trimmed this one down exactly. What happened though, as I'm looking at it, I realize that's a lot of kind of plain blah cardstock. I'm really going to need some more grass up above there. Besides, it was a little too wide. Another thing is I went ahead and stamped my greeting on this strip, and I left it in the video because I wanted to show you a lot of times with a bold greeting like this, it's really hard to get a really nice, solid, bold image impression with your first stamping. I tried to just eyeball it and stamp it again, and it just wasn't quite exact. This would have been a good place to use the Misty. I didn't. I wish I had, because then I wouldn't have ruined that whole strip. So I ended up just trimming another strip of cardstock and stamping it again, and it worked fine. However, if I had it to do over, I totally would have just grabbed my Misty. It would have made it so much easier. So there are my 5 little pockets of grass, my stamped Words Defined greeting. I'm going to take the Page Huggers images and stamp those on smooth white cardstock using Simon Says Stamp Intense Black ink. Going to have a bunch of carrots here because I want to be able to tuck those into each of those little pocket areas throughout the front of this card design. I'm going to set those aside while I go ahead and ink up my stripe cover with some squeezed lemonade and dried marigold distress inks. Not worrying too much about those little sections in between, but I want to make sure the edges are all colored really well. Then I'm using Twisted Citron and Mowed Lawn Distress inks for the grass. The mowed lawn is mostly just along the blades of grass, that jaggedy edge. The rest of it is Twisted Citron. I like to use a scrap of cardstock to keep my fingers out of the ink. I have found when inking up watercolor cardstock, your fingerprints will really mark up the panel. So I like to use a scrap of cardstock to hold onto it. That keeps my fingers out of it, keeps me from having any of those ugly finger marks. Once it's dry, it is no problem at all. I spritzed it all with water from a distress sprayer, let it sit for 15 to 20 seconds, and then blotted it all dry with a paper towel. Gives it that great distressed look. I'm going to go ahead and assemble my whole background before I color my images. And what I'm going to do is place adhesive on the back of the stripe cover die on each of these little strips. Take my grass, tuck it behind, flip it over and line it up. And you can see those little tufts of grass now sticking out. It's kind of coming, you can see it much better once it's got some color on it. Again, adhesive on the back, slip the grass border inside, line that up on the back. We'll do the two top ones next. This is going to be the very tippy top one. I like to line it up on the back, just kind of make it look a little nicer on the front that way. I am using a nice strong adhesive, the Glue Glider Permatac adhesive. One of my favorite things to do, and you've probably seen me do it a lot, is add a decorative die cut stitched sort of border. And these are the fine trimmings dies from Mama Elephant, and they add such a nice finished edge. I use that along both long sides of the greeting strip. I purposely left it long. That gave me a little bit more room to play so that I could make sure and get it lined up perfectly the way I wanted to on the front of my stripe cover. Tucking that bottom edge underneath some of the grass, and I'm just going to set that aside while I color all of my images. I purposely left that strip long just in case I needed to adjust it when I go to place the bunny behind that strip, and I'll show you that in a second. I am coloring in all of my images with Copic markers, some oranges and greens for the carrots. Simple coloring. After I colored the first one, I did it more assembly line style, so I did all of the orange. Then I'll go back and do all of the green. I wanted to make sure with that first one that I liked those colors before I committed that to all of them. Tried to keep the coloring fairly simple here. Just 2 shades per color. And I ended up finishing the tops of each of the little greenery there. I did go back with my darker marker and add some little dots. The bunny is going to be in shades of warm gray, light warm gray colors. The darkest is just going to be warm gray 6, and there's going to be very, very little of that in the bunny. What I love about these Page Huggers dies is that the little hands there in front die cut, so they hold on to things. In this instance, the whole card was basically inspired by the fact I wanted one of those critters holding on to that definition stamp or definition banner. So I tucked him there behind after I die cut them with the coordinating Page Huggers dies. He's also holding a carrot in one hand. I added black glazed pen to his eyes. And then I'm going to take some Zotz Bling glue dots and tuck the carrots in to each of those little pockets so that there's going to be carrots all throughout this little vegetable garden. Definitely happiness for a bunny. The glue dots are just a nice, non-messy way to attach small little die cut pieces, small embellishments to a card. They're my favorite. I'm going to go ahead and flip over my stripe cover now, trim off that excess, and adhere my whole panel to the front of a top fold card base using that glue glider Permatac adhesive again. And that is going to finish up this happiness themed card showcasing the Mama Elephant Words Defined stamp set, as well as the Page Huggers stamps and dies and the older stripe cover and fine trimmings dies. Thanks for watching this video showcasing new stamps and dies from the Mama Elephant August release. The supplies I've used are listed and linked below the video here on YouTube. Here are a couple more videos showcasing Mama Elephant stamps and dies that you might be interested in. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.